Hello and welcome to this edition of Power Politics. I'm Scott McGee, and what a busy week in politics it has been. Have we seen the end of mask mandates in the state? A New York Supreme Court judge had blocked it, but it's now under appeal. Plus, the state attorney general takes legal action to compel Donald Trump Jr., and Ivanka Trump to give testimony in a civil investigation involving multiple Hudson Valley properties. And a number of notable passings. Convicted murderer and real estate heir Robert Durst dies in prison, waiting to be tried for the death of his wife, Kathy Durst. Her family now ready to go public with their frustration on the eve of the 40-year anniversary of her disappearance. Plus, a big name in politics no longer with us here in Westchester. Longtime Democratic leader Reggie Lafayette has passed. And we also want to mention the two NYPD police officers who were killed. Another huge tragedy for the state of New York. We want to talk about that as well. With that much to talk about, we need to get started. Here to add some perspective on these stories, two political analysts for us, Shannon Powell, Democrat and member of Indivisible, and Dan Schorr, a former prosecutor and former Republican. Dan and Shannon, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Scott. Nice to be here.
Good to have you here. Let's start with this New York judge who ended the mask mandate, saying basically he agrees with the sentiment, but not the way the governor did it, unilaterally without the legislature in the absence of an emergency order. So that order is now under appeal, but the mask mandate itself scheduled to expire anyway, February 1st. We're just a few days from that. The governor had this to say about it.
I don't want to keep any requirements for safety in place a day longer than necessary, but I will not do it a day before we can do it safely.
All right, Dan, you're a former prosecutor. What do you think of the judge's order?
There's two very separate issues here that's important to separate. One is, should there be a mask mandate? And two, does the governor have the legal authority to unilaterally implement a mask mandate? Governor Cuomo was given very broad emergency powers at the beginning of the pandemic, but the legislature last March passed a law saying that they were pulling back these emergency powers. And this judge was saying that Governor Hochul doesn't have the power on her own to just implement the statewide mask mandate, that she needs to go to the legislature, have them pass a law, she could sign it, and then they can have this. And the judge specifically said in his decision, he wasn't ruling on the merits of the mask mandate. He said it was well-intentioned, but that she just didn't have the legal authority to implement it on her own. So that's very different than whether or not the judge agreed with the public policy benefits of the mask mandate.
Pretty much the sentiment that the judge said, I agree with what you're doing, I just don't like the way you're doing it. Do you think that she should, let's assume that this mask mandate expires on Tuesday as it's supposed to, do you think it should be extended as these numbers from Omicron start going down?
Well, as the Omicron numbers go down, we certainly need to find an end to the mask mandate. I understand it's there to protect people, to keep people healthy and to protect lives. But at the same time, we don't want children growing up wearing masks for a long time in school. So I think there needs to be some metrics based on science to reduce masking, maybe in conjunction with local case rates, vaccination rates. So it's not going to be pulled back completely while we have the Omicron wave still going on, but we definitely need to find a sunset for at least some of the masking for people who are vaccinated in areas with lower rates, which hopefully the rates will go down. But it would be best if these policies are set through law, through the legislature, not just the governor on her own deciding whether there's a mandate or not.
Shannon?
Well, the mask mandate is about keeping people safe, keeping businesses and schools open until the threat of this latest variant subsides, which the good news is it is. As President Biden said, look, 96% of schools are open. They're open here in Westchester. This is because, we have mandates like that are keeping people safe. So why throw the baby out with the bathwater? 95% of New Yorkers now have had at least one shot of the vaccine. This is great. I mean, the anti-vaxxers making all this noise are a very small minority of people who, when you look at the numbers, are way outside of the mainstream. But as Kathy Hochul said, Governor Hochul said, she's trying to do what's in the best interest of the people, and she doesn't want to do it any longer than she has to. And I do think having some metrics is a good idea, and I trust that she will do that.
Yeah, let's sort of talk about that a little bit more, Shannon. Talking about what Dan just said, we've had parents in Westchester, on Long Island, all over the place, basically all the suburbs. A significant group of parents are saying, we don't think kids should be wearing masks anymore. What do you think about metrics or some other things so that the kids in school can go without masks because the parents, the kids, a lot of folks are tired of it, yet some are really concerned about their kids going to school without masks on.
Sure, exactly. And I think there's a vocal minority of people who are making the most noise and getting all of the news coverage, when I think there are a lot of parents who are concerned and don't want to go have their children be exposed and are, again, interested in the public health benefits of having a mask on. And so again, schools are open. That's what we want. We don't want to have to close schools. We don't want to have kids get sick. So I do think that there should be metrics, but again, it shouldn't be up to parents who are not health professionals. This should be left up to health professionals, people within the Department of Health, working with other government agencies to come up with something, not people who aren't medical professionals. They are not the ones who should be making decisions that impact the health of New Yorkers.
All right, I want to switch gears a little bit, talk about Attorney General Letitia James' civil investigation into the Trump Organization. Her office laying out some of the discrepancies in valuing Trump properties. For instance, his Seven Springs estate, alternately worth either $291 million or $80 million, depending on the situation. His Briarcliff golf course fluctuating between being worth $8 million or $70 million. Dan, as a former prosecutor, you've seen what she's released. What do you think of this case? I should acknowledge this is a civil investigation, but it could turn criminal.
Right. This is definitely a serious allegation. The allegations are that there was intentional fraud in the valuation of properties for tax benefits, for loan benefits. If true, that could have a significant effect and damage on the organization through civil fines and other penalties. But what undermines this investigation is that Letitia James campaigned on suing Donald Trump. And as a former prosecutor, I can say it's very dangerous when any prosecutor or any politician campaigns or governs based on a promise to go after a specific individual who's a political opponent. And she kept saying, I'm going to go after him. I'm going to go after him. Now, certainly Donald Trump's not innocent in this area. When he was president, he clearly over and over again called for locking up his political opponents, encouraged his attorney general to go after his political opponents. So it's not that he's innocent in that realm, but it's dangerous when anyone, any prosecutor, any politician says, I'm going after my opponent. I'm going after the person who's unpopular politically in a prosecutorial way, because prosecutors need to be seen as above the fray, doing independent investigations. And maybe this investigation actually is independent, but it's being undermined by the way she campaigned on this issue.
It seems to be a pretty valid point that Dan's making, Shannon. How do you feel? Are you concerned, perhaps, that this investigation, if it were to turn criminal, could become tainted by the fact that the Attorney General did campaign on that issue?
Well, it's my understanding there is a criminal investigation that's underway with the DA in Manhattan. Dan would probably speak more, fluently about that. So again, you have a civil and a criminal investigation underway. Again, where there's smoke, there's fire. Tish James versus Donald Trump. I mean, Trump may have met his match in Tish James, and I do have faith that she is undertaking the investigation, with as best as she can, using the guidance of her office and doing it in a very, respectable way.
All right, I do. Speaking of law enforcement, we had a tragedy this week. 2 NYPD officers killed in the line of duty. The funeral services for Officer Jason Rivera happening on Friday. Officer Wilbert Mora, he will be laid to rest this week. Let's sort of broaden that just a little bit. Just a tragedy for the entire state. But this violence against police officers has been an issue for some time now. Are you concerned that this is going to become a political issue, Shannon, because of the way that we have had, the parole, changes to parole, those types of things, that we are so all of a sudden sort of soft on crime, and that's allowing this violence against police officers to happen?
Well, I think what we need to really look at are some cases of where we are making strides in trying to prevent crime like this. Look at Westchester County just this week. The DA had a program with numerous different law enforcement agencies where they got ghost guns. I think it was something like 100 ghost guns and other illegal guns off the streets. That was, again, working with various law enforcement agencies, including the FBI Safe Streets program. These are the kinds of initiatives that we need to invest in that'll work, that will make our community safer. So I think that to have officials who are going to invest in these kind of programs is very important, and we need to really focus on that.
Dan, I've only got about 45 seconds left, but I want to give you a chance to respond.
This is a horrible tragedy. These two young police officers were responding to a domestic violence incident, and they were killed in response. And we don't know if it's directly related to the fact that there's this increasing vitriol towards police officers, but my friends who are police officers and prosecutors, they tell me it's unparalleled in the last couple of decades, the way people have this hatred towards police officers. And we need to really encourage people to not act like that, not have this hatred towards police officers. Most of them are doing an excellent job, and we need to support them.
It's certainly an excellent sentiment for not just police officers, but for people in general. We've reported hate crimes, other things are way up. Everyone just needs to take a breath. One of the things I think that another side effect of this pandemic that we just don't really fully understand, but it's certainly having its effects. All right, guys, thank you very much for that. We're just getting started here on Power and Politics. Coming up, Robert Durst evades justice again. We'll talk about that next. And welcome back to this edition of Power and Politics. I'm Scott McGee. I'm joined by our two political analysts, Democrat and member of Indivisible, Shannon Powell, and former prosecutor and conservative Dan Schorr. All right, so next week is the 40-year anniversary of the disappearance of Kathy Durst, a tragedy that her family does plan to acknowledge in a very public way. They're doing so partially because the man they are convinced killed Kathy, that's her husband, Robert Durst, escaped justice this month just as he was about to stand trial. He passed away in prison. Kathy's brother releasing a statement that says in part, quote, "Now more than ever, it is important to ask why it took so long to get to this point. My family and I have serious questions and we deserve answers." And in fact, it took 39 and a half years for charges to be filed at all. Kathy's family making no secret of the fact they believe his money and power helped him avoid justice. All right, Dan, this isn't fair to you, but I want to just talk to you as a former prosecutor. Do you believe that allegation? Is that a fair accusation for them to make?
Well, there was certainly a problem that so much time went on and that he was never indicted or charged until very recently. So they're right about that. But in terms of whether his family's power stopped him from being arrested, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I was in the DA office under Jeanine Pirro when she was the DA there. I didn't work on the Durst case, but they had prosecutors assigned to that investigation, and they were very interested in putting that case together and trying to bring him to justice. It never happened back then. But I certainly can tell you as a former prosecutor in that office, there was never a sense that power from the Durst family was preventing that from happening for whatever reason. And the current DA said it was because of prosecutorial and investigative missteps. It never happened. And that's a tragedy. But he ultimately was convicted for a separate murder in California, and he was charged here before he died.
I'm curious if you think, did we change as a society in the last 20, 30, 40 years, and that perhaps, that we would take a man's word that he had nothing to do with it then, that maybe we are more likely to believe the victims, or in this case, at least believe the fact that she was a victim, and perhaps we wouldn't have believed that 20, 30, 40 years ago. Is that part of the story?
I think that's a great point. I think that was initially part of the problem, that investigators believed his version of events of where she was before she disappeared, and that led to a trail of investigation that might not have led to the truth. But by the early 2000s, certainly 2004, 2005, when he was on trial in Texas for a separate murder, by that point, prosecutors and police in Westchester were very much looking at him for this murder and trying to put that case together. So that was still a significant amount of time after her disappearance. But there did come a time that's now 15 years ago or more where law enforcement was trying to put this together. And unfortunately, they were never successful in charging him until very recently.
Now, Shannon, this is one of those cases, maybe one of the first to bring domestic violence to the forefront. What do you think we can learn from a case like this?
Well, I think Dan's point is excellent that, it took many years for law enforcement officials to really take violence against women seriously. And, finally they are, although there are still challenges when it comes to that. So I think through increased training and awareness and frankly, empowerment amongst women, hopefully we will continue to make strides and, reduce the number of tragedies like this from happening. I mean, it's a very sad case, and hopefully the family can have some closure.
Indeed. All right, let's switch gears one more time because we had some huge news out of Washington this week. Stephen Breyer announcing his retirement from the Supreme Court. President Biden promised during the campaign he would nominate a black woman if given a chance. He has since reiterated that promise. Shannon, is this an opportunity for the president to give the left wing of the party what they want at a time they have been very frustrated with him because of the failure of passing voting rights and the BBB and other things?
I think this is great. I mean, I think the opportunity to have a Supreme Court justice is again going to be a nice fresh pivot and start for the president. I mean, I think it's going to be very invigorating to have a black woman, long overdue. I mean, if you just think the first woman was put on the Supreme Court, that was a promise that Ronald Reagan made, actually, as he ran for president in 1980. So look at how many years it's taken to actually get to the point where we're going to have a black woman. That is something that, you know, President Biden is going to deliver on that promise. I think it's going to be very exciting, and I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to the Supreme Court, and hopefully it will be invigorating, and it will also, you know, it might not change the voting breakdown of the Supreme Court, but it will give, you know, the Supreme Court a different outlook, and I think that's going to be excellent.
Now, Dan, you come from a different political viewpoint. What do you say to those folks on the far left who have to now realize it's really up to Joe Manchin to confirm whoever it is that gets into the Supreme Court next?
Well, that's an interesting question. It might come down to Joe Manchin. We've never actually had a Supreme Court nominee vote that was 50-50 and had to go to a tie. We might have that now, but some of the key people that have been floated as potential nominees by the president have had some approval in the past. One in particular was approved with, I believe, 53 votes just very recently, including some Republican votes. So I think if it's a person who has a good track record, it's someone who is replacing a justice that was appointed by a Democrat, I think there'll be less opposition from Republicans, and it might not need to come down to that 50-50 vote. But Joe Manchin in the past has shown a lot of deference to presidents of both parties when deciding how to vote on judicial nominees. So I would suspect that he would go along with whoever Joe Biden nominated, as long as it was a person that he could support.
Do you have any political viewpoints on this one, Shannon? Are you looking for someone to be a true liberal on this court, or would someone who maybe looks a little more centrist be okay for you? Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm obviously going to like a more, you know, liberal woman. I think again, having some fresh blood into, you know, from the liberal left of center viewpoint is going to be a much welcome change for the Supreme Court. And
do you expect that Joe Manchin, if he blocks this, I just can't even imagine what the reaction will be from the left if that happens.
Hopefully Joe Manchin will do the right thing.
I see you're being diplomatic at this time. We'll see what happens. We'll have to see. It's an interesting list of people that are on that possible list right now, and we'll have to see where we go from that. But it's going to be a big decision, and it could be enough to help galvanize the Democrats and perhaps move some of those other things along. It looks like voting rights is dead, but in this case, they may just do some small piecemeal parts of that. Or maybe this will help sort of reinvigorate the BBB once again. We'll have to wait and see. All right, guys, once again, this discussion is not over. Coming up, we do unfortunately have to acknowledge one more well-known name in politics that unfortunately was taken way too soon with some very strong ties to our area. We'll be right back with that. And welcome back to this edition of Power and Politics. I'm Scott McGee. I'm joined by our political analysts, Shannon Powell and Dan Schorr. Now, recently we lost a powerhouse of local politics, Reginald Lafayette. Reggie, as he was best known, was a longtime Democratic leader and Westchester County Board of Elections Democratic Commissioner. Now, Shannon, you knew him a little bit. You maybe didn't always agree with him, but what did the political world lose with the passing of Reggie Lafayette?
Look, Reggie's death is a true loss for Westchester County. I want to extend my condolences to his family. I mean, he was a true pioneer and a leader. And I want to also mention it's important to note that he was also a mentor to many people. So his death is something that we all feel, and it's very sad, and it's going to be hard to fill his shoes.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, you're actually on the other side of the aisle for much of this time, but I understand you also got to know him a little bit. What was your experience like?
Yeah, I've talked with him at so many events over a lot of years, and putting aside the political part of it, he would fight for the causes he believed in and the candidates he believed in, but he was such a nice person. He would come up to me, I would go up to him, we would talk, and he always had this real sincere viewpoint of being good to people and caring about people and being nice to people. And that was people that were his political opponents, people who were his allies. He was just a really, really good person. And there's not enough of people like that in local politics and national politics. He was really a great person that I was really happy to get to know a little bit. And it's a tragedy for people across Westchester that he died so young.
Yeah, well said. Thank you very much, Dan. And thank you, Shannon, for those thoughtful words. All right, folks, that's it for this edition of Power and Politics. More news and weather coming up next.